She stood at the edge of wealth, a soaked uniform clinging to her skin, eyes locked on the marble mansion that glittered under Lagos rain. The guards mocked her. The guests ignored her. And the rich family inside? They wanted her gone. But everything changed. The moment the old butler heard her surname, that single word cracked open secrets buried for 25 years, secrets of love, betrayal, and a legacy no billionaire was ready to face. Pause. Tension builds. Who was she? Why did her name send fear through golden walls? And how did a forgotten waitress rise to threaten an empire? This is the story of Autumn Sterling Montgomery. The Lagos rain came down in sheets, slicing through the evening air like liquid glass. Thunder growled low over Victoria Island, and distant lightning cracked against the clouds, casting silver streaks across the skyline. Beneath that restless sky, a single figure stood at the base of a towering wrought-iron gate, drenched, breathless, but unwilling to turn back. Autumn Sterling tightened her grip on the catering tray strapped to her forearm, her other hand shielding her face from the storm. The estate before her loomed like a palace from another realm. Montgomery Hills. The centerpiece of Lagos luxury. All glass, marble, and gold leaf. It looked less like a home, and more like the headquarters of heaven. Autumn had never seen a building so clean it reflected the rain. As she stepped forward, puddles splashed beneath her worn sneakers, drawing the attention of two suited security guards beneath the stone archway. One of them, short and stocky with mirrored shades despite the gloom, raised a hand. "Hey, wait, where do you think you're going?" Autumn adjusted her catering badge, her voice trembling with the kind of calm that only came from years of humiliation. "I'm with Delish and Deliver. I'm on shift for the gala." The taller guard scoffed, looking her up and down. Her uniform was slightly frayed, her apron stained from an earlier spill, and her braids hung heavy with rainwater. "This party is for billionaires, not beggars," he sneered. Behind them, the grand circular driveway buzzed with activity. Rolls-Royces glided past like whales in an ocean of status. A white Ferrari purred to a stop at the front entrance as a woman stepped out, laughing in a burst of sequins and perfume. Inside the mansion, the world glittered. Waiters in crisp tuxedos moved like ghosts. Classical music floated through the glass walls. Giant digital screens glowed with the Montgomery Innovations logo, celebrating the anniversary of their groundbreaking AI in Nigerian agriculture. Men in tailored suits shook hands over billion-naira deals. Women in dresses worth more than entire houses posed with champagne and smiled for press cameras. Autumn wasn't meant to be seen here, especially not at the front gate, soaking and shivering. She stepped back slightly as one of the guards reached for his radio. The taller one stepped forward, barking into the rain. "Madam, please carry yourself out of here. You're blocking the view." Just then, a burst of laughter rang out from the entryway. Standing atop the marble steps like a fashion ad come to life was Savannah Montgomery, the heiress. Tall, luminous, and wrapped in a backless green satin gown. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Her hair was pulled tight into a sculptural bun, and her expression curled into something venomous the moment she saw Autumn. "Oh no," Savannah said, her voice carrying through the drizzle. "Someone left the kitchen door open." Laughter erupted from the small circle of influencers and socialites around her. Autumn held her ground, jaw tight, eyes burning but silent. She had worked 6 events this week, walked from Yaba to Lekki twice, gone hungry just to afford transportation here. And tonight, she would be humiliated in front of Lagos elite because her shoes weren't shiny enough. One of the guards moved forward. "I said move back. Hold it." The voice came low and firm, polished, aged like mahogany. Every movement stopped. From behind the colonnade, an elderly man stepped out in full butler uniform, gloved hands behind his back. His posture was regal, the kind of posture that came from decades of watching wealth from the shadows. Elijah, chief butler of the Montgomery household, the only man who had served every generation. His eyes narrowed as they landed on Autumn. "I said hold it," he repeated, stepping past the guard and toward her. His face studied her the way one studies a memory long buried, haunted, hesitant, unsure. Autumn stood straighter. She didn't know why. Something about his presence demanded it. "What's your name, child?" Elijah asked. Autumn blinked at the question. No one inside that house had ever called her child before. It was strangely gentle. She hesitated, then spoke. "Autumn. Autumn Sterling." The wind stilled for a moment. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Elijah's face drained of color. His breath hitched. Slowly, his gloved hand reached for the stone wall beside him, steadying himself. Behind him, Savannah scoffed again, annoyed. "What's going on? Send her away." But Elijah wasn't listening. His voice was barely above a whisper, but the silence around him made it thunder. "Sterling," he repeated. Autumn nodded. A flicker of memory sparked behind Elijah's eyes. A sunlit room. A woman with braids and laughter in her eyes. A child's giggle echoing off marble. A promise made. A love never spoken aloud. Without another word, Elijah turned to the guards and said, "She comes in." Savannah's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Elijah, you're not serious. That girl is—" "She comes in," he said again, firmer now. "She's not staff. She's not a guest. She's something else entirely." One by one, the guards stepped aside, eyes unsure, hands frozen at their waists. Autumn, still soaked from the rain, stepped through the golden gates. She had no idea what storm she'd just walked into. Elijah leaned in close, his voice like a ghost from the past. "You look just like her." The scent of money wasn't always crisp notes or leather-bound contracts. Sometimes it was roses pressed into wallpaper. Sometimes it was polished marble reflecting a face that didn't belong. As Autumn Sterling stepped past the foyer into the heart of the Montgomery mansion, she felt the weight of wealth not in its shine, but in its silence. Everything glistened, the floors, the ceilings, the columns that stretched like ivory spines toward the chandeliered heavens. She had carried trays in dozens of upscale homes across Lagos, but nothing like this. The Montgomery estate wasn't just wealth, it was legacy, layered and guarded like a national secret. Elijah walked just ahead of her, his steps sure, his gloved hands behind his back. But every few paces, he turned as if to make sure she was still there, as if she were a vision that could vanish if he blinked too long. "Why, are you helping me?" she finally asked. He didn't stop walking. "Because the truth always comes home, and sometimes it wears your face." Autumn didn't understand, not yet. But as they moved deeper into the house, the walls began to whisper. Literally. Photographs framed in gold lined the hallway. Montgomery ancestors dressed like African royalty, wedding portraits, boardroom victories, gala nights, international awards. Men in tuxedos, women in silk, smiles sharp as diamonds. Autumn paused by one. An older photo, black and white, from the late 90s. A younger Logan Montgomery shaking hands with a former Lagos governor, flanked by a team of engineers. Her eyes scanned the background, maids in uniform lining the wall. One of them looked hauntingly familiar. She leaned in closer. "Keep going," Elijah said gently. "You haven't seen her yet." Autumn turned a corner and entered the East Wing corridor. Quieter, colder. No music, No guests, just a hush that pressed against her chest. At the end of the hall, a painting stood covered in linen. Unlike the others, it wasn't hung. It leaned, hidden. Elijah stepped forward and removed the cloth with the reverence of a man unveiling memory. And there she was, a woman in a flowing dress of deep earth tones, regal braids piled high on her head, her eyes soft but piercing, her belly round with child. The background faded into soft pastels, like a dream caught on canvas. Autumn's breath caught. "That's," she whispered. Elijah nodded. "Marilyn Sterling, your mother." Autumn took a shaky step forward. The woman in the portrait radiated strength, dignity, fearlessness. She didn't look like a maid. She looked like the owner of the entire estate. "My mother was here. She lived here," Elijah said. "Worked here, dreamed here, and she loved here. More than she should have." Autumn's throat tightened. "Why haven't I heard any of this? Why was her name never mentioned?" Elijah's expression darkened, pain tightening around his eyes. "Because she wasn't supposed to exist," he said quietly. "At least, not in their version of the story." In the West Wing, Logan Montgomery adjusted his cufflinks before the full-length mirror. Behind him, a young assistant whispered updates from the gala. Guest arrivals, media coverage, shareholder praise. But Logan's attention drifted. Something in the house felt unsettled. He stepped onto the terrace and looked down toward the garden fountain. From above, he could see Elijah moving with the waitress. No, the girl. The one who said her name was Sterling. He narrowed his eyes. Elijah hadn't looked that shaken in years. Back in the East Wing, Autumn pressed her fingers to the edge of the portrait's frame. "She was pregnant in this painting," she whispered. "With me." "Yes." "And no one said a word all these years?" Elijah sighed. "She was erased, Autumn, not because she failed, but because she became dangerous." "Dangerous?" "She became part of Logan's world, not just as a lover, as a mind. She had ideas, bold ones, fashion, technology, education. She wanted to build a brand from within this house. But when power meets fear, truth becomes a threat." Autumn turned slowly, her thoughts unraveling like thread. "No wonder this house feels familiar." He nodded. "It should. You took your first steps in the East Parlor." She blinked. "I did. I was there, the night she left. I thought I'd never see that spark again." The ripple began quietly. A maid caught sight of Autumn and whispered to another. A gardener looked twice and paused at the rake in his hand. In the kitchens, a steward stared at the portrait on the old milk tin and said, "She looks like—" The name Sterling hadn't been spoken in these walls for 25 years. But tonight, it slipped through like wind under a locked door. Savannah stormed into the drawing room in a flurry of silk. "Elijah," she snapped, "why are you parading that waitress like she belongs here?" He turned to her with an eerie calm. "You don't know the full story," he said. "I don't care," Savannah hissed. "That name died a long time ago." "Maybe," Elijah said, turning away. "But truth doesn't stay buried forever, even in gold." Later that night, Autumn wandered through the sprawling house alone, drawn by something unnamed. She ended up in the mansion's private library, massive and silent. Shelves lined with first editions, ancient texts, and manuals from Montgomery Innovation's earliest prototypes. She ran her fingers along the titles. Her foot hit something. A rug. Slightly raised at the corner. She bent down and pulled it aside. A panel. Small, wooden, oddly clean in a room coated with dust. She pressed it. Click. A creak. Behind a false shelf, A narrow door opened slowly, revealing a passage that descended into shadow. Cold air poured out, stale, preserved, a room, untouched, waiting. Autumn stepped back, breath caught between fear and wonder. Whatever lay beyond that door hadn't seen light in decades. And yet, it remembered her. The narrow door groaned open like an old throat, spilling a stale breath into the library. Cool, still, heavy with memory. Autumn stood at the threshold, one hand on the frame, her eyes adjusting to the dim light as dust spiraled like golden smoke in the air. A single shaft of sunlight broke through a high, stained glass window, cutting across the small room inside. Time had not touched this space. No breeze had crossed its air. No footsteps had disturbed its silence. It was a tomb made not for a body, but for a woman's erased life. Autumn stepped in. The door clicked shut behind her. She didn't flinch. This place, it remembered her. It was in the scent of old fabric, the faint perfume clinging to a silk shawl tossed over the chair. It was in the cracked mirror leaning against the wall, still holding the faint outline of someone who once stood before it. It was in the unfinished sketches pinned to a corkboard, futuristic dresses, bold West African silhouettes merged with minimalist global flair. The initials MS appeared on every corner, some in ink, some embroidered into fabric scraps. Marilyn Sterling. Autumn moved like a daughter through a dream, reaching out and touching the edge of a wooden desk. A spool of thread, a folded paper marked prototype, a dusty Polaroid showing a younger Marilyn laughing in a measuring room with a tape around her neck and pins in her hand. Behind her, Logan Montgomery, shirt rolled to the elbows. Smiling, looking at her, not like a boss, but like a man who once had the world in his hands and gave it away. "Elijah," Autumn whispered. She lived here. She worked in here." Elijah stepped slowly into the room, removing his gloves as if entering sacred ground. His voice came low, worn. "This was her studio, not for cleaning, not for service, for building something the world had never seen." Autumn's eyes fell on a cabinet built into the wall, its hinges rusted. She tugged it open. Inside, file folders, dozens, labeled meticulously, Sterling Design Pipeline, Business Strategy, Early Stage Projections, Joint Venture, Montgomery and Sterling. Her heart stopped. "Wait, what is this?" she said, thumbing through the crisp sheets. Elijah stepped beside her, his face lined with guilt. "Your mother," he said quietly, "was not just the help. She was Logan's creative partner when he started his tech empire. The aesthetic, the branding, the fashion-integrated AI, those were her ideas." Autumn looked up sharply. "But she was never mentioned in any company history, not in interviews, not even as a consultant." "Because when she became pregnant with you," Elijah said, "Logan's board panicked. They said it would destroy the company's clean narrative. They told him, erase her, or lose everything." She stared down at the plans in her hand. Typed, numbered, filed like proof no one thought would be found. "He chose his image," she said, voice flat. Elijah didn't answer. He didn't need to. The walls did. Meanwhile, across the estate, Logan Montgomery stared out his office window. The skyline of Lagos stretched before him, glinting, booming, digital. But none of it calmed the tremor in his fingers. Elijah's silence, the girl's arrival, the name, Sterling. It was all surfacing, after all these years. He turned from the glass, walked to a locked cabinet, and opened it. Inside, one photo, hidden from everyone. Marilyn, holding a newborn. Her face tired, glowing, fierce. His chest tightened. He thought he'd buried it all. But guilt was not a corpse. It breathed beneath your ribcage until one day it asked to be seen again. Back in the studio, Autumn sat cross-legged on the floor, papers fanned around her. The vision Marilyn had was revolutionary, even now. Tech-forward African fashion with embedded wellness sensors, smart textiles, sustainable materials harvested from Nigeria's underused agriculture. It was 2 decades ahead of its time. She shook her head. She was brilliant. She still is, Elijah said. Through you. Autumn looked up. I don't want revenge, she said slowly. I don't want to tear them down. No. I want to build what she couldn't finish. I want to raise her name so high, even history has to rewrite itself. Elijah smiled, tears collecting silently in the corners of his eyes. That, he said, is the greatest justice. But across the house, Savannah had finally done what she wasn't supposed to do. Dig. She stormed into Logan's office, tossing a tablet onto his desk. You want to explain this? She snapped. On screen, an old document with Marilyn's name signed beside Logan's. Partnership, intellectual property. She's not just a waitress, Savannah hissed. She's her daughter, which means she could— She won't, Logan interrupted sharply. She doesn't want to destroy anything. Savannah glared. You're too soft. If this gets out, she'll own half. Logan looked down at the photo of Marilyn and whispered, maybe she should have. The next morning, Lagos buzzed with its usual rhythm. Horns, heat, hustle. But in a glass and gold rooftop lounge in Lekki Phase 1, the city's top fashion tech investors gathered for brunch. Autumn walked in wearing one of her mother's designs, modernized, electric blue with woven copper threads tracing the bodice like circuits. Her braids were swept back, her presence turned heads. No one recognized her as the drenched girl at the gate. She stepped to the microphone. My name, she said calmly, is Autumn Sterling. The room went still. I'm not here to beg. I'm not here to accuse. I'm here to finish what was stolen. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd gathered at Lagos Fashion Nexus, an elite event known for celebrating innovation, excess, and the kind of creativity that made billionaires blink twice. Cameras were poised, influencers perched at the edge of their seats. The runway glittered beneath a geometric canopy of lights, but all eyes waited for the name no one could ignore anymore. Sterling Reborn. The screen pulsed with light. A soft hum. Then the voice of a woman echoed from the speakers, not Autumn's voice, but the archived, restored voice of Marilyn Sterling, speaking from a forgotten demo reel salvaged from the vault. African women are not trends. We are timelines, threads stitched from struggle and brilliance. We don't walk runways, we walk revolutions. Then the lights rose, and there she was, Autumn Sterling. She stepped onto the runway in a sharply cut white jumpsuit. Her mother's original sketch brought to life. Clean lines, bold shoulders, and woven copper fibers traced down her arms like futuristic veins. Her braids glimmered with digital strands of fabric that changed hue with motion. The crowd gasped. She didn't smile. She didn't pose. She walked like she belonged there, like the stage had been waiting for her since before she was born. And maybe it had. Behind the stage, tech giants from Ghana, South Africa, and Morocco huddled with stylists, whispering to each other. The word sterling had gone from buried to branded in a matter of weeks. Autumn didn't just launch a label, she launched a revolution. Sterling Reborn was more than fashion. It was Africa's first fully tech-integrated couture line. Smart fabrics that responded to body temperature, embedded wellness indicators for maternal health, QR-coded history tags on every garment, tracing the cultural inspiration behind the stitch. And every pattern? Adapted from Marilyn's archive, patterns created in secret, now seen on the world's most opulent runway. By the end of the show, 3 investors approached Autumn. One from Nairobi's Silicon Quarter, one from Berlin's wearable tech syndicate, and one, Lagos's youngest billionaire in property tech, offered to buy a 30% stake outright. But Autumn refused. "I'm not building a brand to be owned," she said. "I'm building a home for stories that were silenced." At the Montgomery estate, Logan Montgomery watched the live stream from his private lounge. He didn't say a word. But his eyes, those calculating, careful eyes, betrayed the tremor in his chest. She was more than his daughter. She was a mirror, one that reflected everything he tried to erase. And for the first time in decades, Logan felt something he'd buried beneath ambition: remorse. Savannah, however, felt nothing of the sort. Rage burned through her as she watched Autumn trend on social media. Marilyn's miracle, the tabloids called her. Legacy in lace. The future Logan denied. It was war. She didn't wait. Savannah hired a crisis PR team, 2 influencers, and a gossip page. She leaked photos of Autumn working as a waitress, questioning her professionalism. Rumors spread about financial fraud, even a fabricated scandal involving AI copyright theft. But the public wasn't moved. The image of Autumn, standing in her mother's design with poise, had already burned into people's hearts. She wasn't a threat. She was truth. And truth had a face now. In the following weeks, Autumn did not retreat. She partnered with 5 young designers from Ajagunle, Ibadan, and Makurdi, gave them access to production labs, marketing teams, and her platform. She renamed the initiative Threads of Tomorrow. Global fashion houses took notice. Then came the TEDx Lagos invitation. Her talk, Erased Women Enduring Dreams, was raw, personal, unflinching. She spoke not just of Marilyn, but of millions of women whose ideas died quietly behind powerful men. My mother didn't fail. She was failed. But now her name threads through every stitch. Her silence gave birth to my sound. The video crossed 5 million views in 10 days. Young women across Nigeria began tagging themselves in self-made designs under the Fyoshker Sterling Reborn. At the next Lagos Business Summit, Autumn stood shoulder to shoulder with Africa's most powerful billionaires. She spoke on innovation, equity, and legacy. Not as an outsider trying to enter, but as a new standard. Elijah watched her from the side of the stage, dressed in a modest gray suit, his hands clasped like prayer. His eyes shimmered with quiet tears. "You're rewriting her story," he whispered, "and yours." Autumn turned to him, smiling gently. "No," she said, "we're just finally telling it." But success rarely walks alone. One late afternoon, Autumn received an invitation. It wasn't digital, not sent by email. A white card was delivered by hand to her studio. Embossed, delicate, it read, "Savannah Montgomery requests your company for a private lunch. No press, no cameras, just peace." The address? An exclusive rooftop restaurant in Ikoyi, one only billionaires frequented. Autumn stood by the window of her studio, holding the card, the golden hour casting shadows over her work table. Elijah entered, cautious. "You don't have to go," he said. "I know," she replied. "But peace deserves to be heard, even if it's a lie." 2 days later, Autumn arrived at the rooftop, dressed in an all-black wrap dress that hugged her strength. Savannah was already seated, sunglasses on, a cocktail untouched in front of her. The skyline shimmered behind them, a city pulsing with ambition. Savannah didn't smile. She simply said, "If you want peace, there's a price." The waves at the private marina clapped gently against anchored yachts as the afternoon sun glazed the water, with gold. Autumn Sterling sat across from Savannah Montgomery at an exclusive glass-paneled restaurant known only to Lagos's elite, a place where power moved quietly, through whispers and veiled toasts, not headlines. Between them sat untouched plates of lobster tails, char-grilled prawns, and crystal flutes of champagne that no one had the appetite to sip. Savannah leaned forward, removing her sunglasses. Her tone was cold, rehearsed. Her eyes shimmered, not with emotion, but with calculation. "You've had your moment," she said. "The media loves a Cinderella. The crowd loves a comeback. But eventually, attention turns. It always does." Autumn said nothing. Her gaze drifted to the horizon, where the water met the sky in a seamless whisper of possibility. Savannah continued, sliding a sleek tablet across the table. "There's NIM 500 million on the table, a silent buyout. You walk away from the Sterling Reborn brand, sign an NDA, and we write you into the family trust. Comfortably, quietly." Autumn blinked slowly. Then she smiled. "I'm not here to eat from the table," she said, pushing the tablet back. "I came to build one." Savannah's face stiffened. "Be careful," she warned. "The deeper you dig, the dirtier your hands get. Your mother wasn't the saint you've painted her to be." Autumn didn't flinch. She reached into her leather tote and laid a small, clear folder on the table. Inside, original stock certificates, each one bearing the Sterling name. "Already found them," Autumn said. "Issued before Montgomery Innovations went public, signed by your father and witnessed by 2 board members. She wasn't just a lover. She was a founder." Savannah's jaw locked. She hadn't expected that. "I'm not here to burn what you built," Autumn added calmly. "I'm here to reclaim what was stolen. My mother's work, her voice, her vision." While Savannah simmered in silence, the war had already moved elsewhere. At the Montgomery Innovations headquarters, a silent storm was brewing. Logan Montgomery sat at the head of a mahogany boardroom table, flanked by executives, legacy investors, and a few sharply dressed legal advisors. The board was agitated. Questions buzzed through the air like hornets. Why was the Sterling name omitted from the origin documents? Was there a partnership agreement? Do we face retroactive liability if Autumn Sterling takes this public? Logan rubbed his temple. For the first time in decades, he didn't have an answer that could crush a storm before it hit. The silence around the table was suffocating. Meanwhile, Autumn moved with clarity and speed. She unveiled a proposal. Merge Sterling Reborn with Montgomery Innovations, forming a new female-led innovation division focused on wearable tech, community-based design, and eco-conscious production. It wasn't just fashion. It was future infrastructure for African women in tech. Some board members leaned in, intrigued. Others frowned, fearing scandal and loss of control. Logan heard the pitch in full silence. Then, finally, he said, "You're not ready." Autumn stared back. Not with defiance, with understanding. "Maybe I'm not. But you weren't either when you stole her ideas and left her to vanish." She walked out of the boardroom without waiting for a vote. That evening, in her new Yaba co-working studio, Autumn sat before a team of young developers and designers, women from local universities, design schools, and self-taught coders. Together, they launched the beta version of her new vision, Legacy Loop, a platform that matched underrepresented African female innovators with global micro-investors, angel funders, and educational partners. Each profile included pitch decks, story reels, product demos, and a mentorship loop. The first 1,000 users signed up within 24 hours. By day 14, Legacy Loop had over 100,000 users across 12 countries. She didn't wait for permission. She built her own lane. At the Montgomery estate, Logan watched news coverage of Autumn's app on Channels TV. The anchor described it as a game changer for tech equity on the continent. He turned the television off and sat in silence. She had built something, not from his resources, not from his name, from hers. Back in the estate's Butler quarters, Elijah sat alone in his room, polishing a silver tea tray long retired. He had served 3 generations, witnessed secrets worth fortunes, and buried more truth than most people could survive knowing. As he reached for his coat to hang it for the evening, something clinked faintly from inside. He reached into the inner lining and pulled out a small silver thumb drive, tucked into the stitching, a forgotten relic. He stared at it, his brows furrowing. He hadn't worn that coat in years. He plugged it into his antique laptop, and the screen flickered. A simple file loaded. Marilyn as finale WAV. He clicked play. A soft, steady voice poured from the speakers. Marilyn. Unmistakably her. Clear, recorded with calm conviction. If you're hearing this, Elijah, then I never made it back. But you did. And she did. Tell Autumn. This isn't about claiming a throne. It's about finishing what I began, and if she's anything like me, she already knows how. Elijah's eyes welled. His hands trembled. Her voice filled the room, filling the cracks he'd sealed for decades. He whispered to the empty space. She's ready, Marilyn. And she's nothing like we feared. She's more. The room was quiet. Not with emptiness, but with anticipation. Autumn sat alone in her studio loft above Legacy Loop HQ. Outside, Lagos shimmered in the distance, streetlights flickering like stars fallen to earth. But in this moment, nothing existed beyond the sound echoing through her headphones. It wasn't music, it was her mother's voice. If you're hearing this, Autumn, then Elijah did what I prayed he would. Autumn's chest tightened. The voice was soft, honeyed yet firm, unmistakably strong. It felt like sunlight had found a way to speak. They'll try to erase you, like they did me. But remember, what we build with our minds cannot be buried by money. It wasn't just a farewell. It wasn't just a confession. It was a digital journal, an encrypted voice log Marilyn recorded during her final months at the Montgomery estate, hidden inside Elijah's coat by hands that knew time was running short. As Autumn listened, tears streamed down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from awe. Elijah was always loyal. Logan was complicated. And you, my daughter, are the only story I want history to remember. This empire, it began with our minds, not their last names. Each voice file played like a puzzle piece clicking into place. But then, the tone shifted. Marilyn began detailing names, business partners, silent allies, and unclaimed investments. The voice grew sharper, focused, like she wasn't just speaking to Autumn, she was training her. Autumn leaned in. I used my alias, Amara Bloom, to purchase 10,000 units in MTech Africa. My lawyer in Ghana holds the key code. And remember the name, Julius Wade. He owes me everything. Autumn sat bolt upright. Julius Wade, now a heavyweight Lagos investor, head of Core Rise Ventures, a firm known for funding only high-vision African startups. That name had power, and her mother had planted it like a seed years ago. The next morning, Autumn didn't waste time. She reached out to Julius. Not through email, not through agents. She sent him one voice clip. Just Marilyn's voice. You told me, Julius, if I ever disappear, I must trust you with my daughter. Well, here she is. Within hours, Julius responded. They met in a minimalist office overlooking the Atlantic. Gray walls, open windows, air thick with unspoken debt. He didn't shake her hand. He embraced her like family. She saved me once, he said simply. I've been waiting for you ever since. He handed her access to a dormant fund under Marilyn's alias, nearly $230 million in liquid assets. Money her mother had earned, hidden, and protected. Autumn didn't flinch. She knew exactly what to do with it. Within weeks, she reinvested it into tech education programs across underserved communities in Surulere and Port Harcourt. She opened micro-hubs, clean, modern co-learning spaces with laptops, mentorship programs, and 3D printers. The press called it Sterling's next revolution. But for Autumn, it wasn't branding. It was restoration. Somewhere in the background, another woman watched quietly. Camille Montgomery, Logan's wife. Elegant, always poised. For years, she had been the distant figure behind the curtain of the Montgomery dynasty. Never confrontational, never loud. But now, she moved silently, and with purpose. A large, anonymous donation arrived at Legacy Loop's education hub the following week. Enough to fund 3 new centers. Enough to make Autumn pause. The sender was listed only as CM, she knew. She had always known about Marilyn, and in her own quiet way, she was choosing sides. In the butler's quarters, Elijah's coughs had worsened. He waved off concern. "I've watched too many rich men fall," he said between coughs. "But now I get to see a daughter rise. That's all the healing I need." Autumn visited him often, sitting by his side as he rested under a woven Kenti blanket, listening to him recount memories of Marilyn, the way she used to hum while sketching, how she danced barefoot in the East Wing on nights when Logan wasn't home. "She left more than a name," Elijah whispered. "She left a blueprint, and you're walking it." Then came the moment. Autumn, dressed in a crimson pantsuit that turned every head in the Montgomery boardroom, walked through the same doors where Logan once denied her. But this time, no one stopped her. She wasn't a threat. She was a force. She placed a proposal on the table, an equal merger between Legacy Loop and Montgomery Innovations, a hybrid platform for fashion tech, education, and female-led innovation. Some board members smiled, some whispered. Logan watched her in silence. Before anyone could respond, the doors burst open. Savannah entered, wearing a sapphire silk suit from a new line, followed by flashing camera crews and an entire PR entourage. "I have an announcement," she said. Behind her, screens lit up. Moda AI, a sleek, minimalist brand promising African tech-integrated couture for the global elite. The tagline pulsed, "Modern Africa, engineered by elegance." Autumn stared at the demo. It was her concept, the very foundation of Sterling Reborn, copied, rebranded, and now being pitched as Savannah's brainchild. Savannah met her eyes, a smirk playing at her lips. "Like I said," she whispered as cameras clicked, "if you want peace, there's a price." The sea shimmered under Lagos's afternoon sun, turning the Atlantic into a giant sheet of glass. But it wasn't just the water that glittered. It was the war that floated on top of it. 2 yachts, 2 runways, 2 legacies preparing to clash in a battle of style, substance, and stolen dreams. One belonged to Autumn Sterling, docked with quiet elegance, her crew dressed in minimalist white, guests sipping hibiscus champagne. The other? Savannah Montgomery's floating palace, loud, massive, with a DJ booth blaring amapiano and drones circling above. The world was watching. Both events were being live-streamed across YouTube, Instagram, and a dedicated fashion tech platform funded by Montgomery Innovations. The global fashion world had never seen anything like it. 2 dueling African fashion dynasties, broadcasting simultaneously, each claiming the future. Autumn stood on her yacht's deck, dressed in an indigo wrap gown embedded with LED thread embroidery that changed with her. Movement. It wasn't just fashion, it was living design. At her back stood 5 models, women from Port Harcourt, Kano, and Accra, dressed in pieces inspired by ancestral patterns, coded into algorithms that allowed each dress to shift hues with temperature, mood, and gesture. On the opposite vessel, Savannah arrived in a gold jumpsuit that glittered like molten coins. Her show exploded with holograms of ancient African cities rising from the deck, celebrity dancers flown in from LA, and monologues voiced by AI bots imitating historical queens. Spectacle versus soul. Autumn's show began with silence. The models walked to the sound of natural elements, rainfall, wind, heartbeat rhythms from Nigerian villages. Each garment came with a scannable legacy loop tag that told the designer's story, the origin of the fabric, and the community that helped create it. Savannah's show began with fireworks and a holographic chariot driven by a simulated version of herself, declaring the arrival of Moda AI, the future engineered. On social media, users could vote live using the Legacy Loop app, which Autumn had opened to the public for this special moment. Votes poured in from across the world: Nairobi, Johannesburg, Accra, Atlanta, Toronto. Viewers weren't just choosing styles, they were choosing values. By the final walk, the numbers were tight. Moda AI trended on Twitter, but Sterling Reborn trended in hearts. The app revealed the final tally, just as both yachts dimmed their lights in unison. Autumn's collection, 52%. Savannah's, 48%. The crowd on Autumn's yacht erupted into gentle applause. Nothing flashy, nothing loud, just genuine, grounded victory. Substance had edged out spectacle, but barely. On the Montgomery yacht, Savannah's face was frozen in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her PR rep whispered something, but she waved them off. It wasn't over. Not for her. Meanwhile, across the crowd of cameras and champagne, Logan Montgomery stood at the dock in a navy linen suit, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He had watched both shows. He had seen his daughter, the one he once tried to erase, walk in the glow of something he no longer recognized. Not defiance. Destiny. In her, he saw a mirror of himself, not in the power, but in the vision. And for the first time, he knew. She wasn't just Marilyn's daughter. She was his. An hour later, after the yachts docked for an after-party on a floating terrace, Autumn stood near the railing, the wind teasing her curls, her eyes locked on the stars above. A tall man in a tailored beige suit approached her quietly. He introduced himself as Rami El Farouk, an investor based in Dubai, head of an innovation fund focused on wearable wellness tech. "I watched the entire event," he said. "You don't just have talent, you have vision, and you build legacy, not just luxury." He handed her a sleek portfolio. A proposal. $5 million in funding, expansion into the Middle East, and North Africa. Autumn accepted it with a quiet nod. Not because it was money, but because it was momentum. Yet, beneath the glow of victory, a shadow was growing. Savannah's partners began pulling out of Moda AI's next campaign. Investors were cautious. Some designers backed out after discovering the tech had been reverse-engineered from Autumn's public prototypes. She was still standing, but the ground beneath her was thinning. As the night wound down, guests mingled on the dock between the yachts. Laughter, camera flashes, live jazz. Elijah, ever present in the background, poured tea from a silver kettle into delicate china, serving guests with the same grace he had for decades. But Autumn noticed something. His hand shook. And then he stumbled slightly. She moved instantly, catching his arm. "Elijah?" she whispered. He tried to wave her off, but the color drained from his face. "I'm fine," he muttered, his pride stronger than the weakness in his knees. But Autumn wasn't fooled. She guided him to a bench, sat him down gently, and fanned him with a cocktail menu. He gripped her hand with sudden intensity. "There's something," he gasped, "something else Marilyn left." Autumn leaned closer. "Where?" His voice was a whisper, fading but urgent. In the vault, behind the east wing fireplace, she said it was the final piece. Autumn froze. The final piece? What could Marilyn have hidden that not even Elijah had seen? And why did it feel like everything until now had only been the beginning? The east wing of the Montgomery estate had always been quiet. Too quiet. Even the air hung heavier there, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Autumn stood before the grand fireplace, the same one she'd passed dozens of times without knowing it held a secret. Elijah leaned gently on her arm, frailer now, a cane in one hand, courage in the other. "The tiles," he whispered, pointing with trembling fingers, third from the left, just under the mantel. Autumn crouched, her fingers tracing the grooves. She pressed one, and a soft click echoed through the chamber. The hearth shifted. Stone slid back with surprising smoothness, revealing a narrow steel door behind a false brick wall. Autumn's breath caught. "It's real," she whispered. She entered first, flicking on the flashlight from her phone. The vault was small but deep, air thick with dust and time. Inside, carefully stacked rolls of designer fabric wrapped in linen, bundles of documents tied with red ribbon, and a small chest carved with initials. She reached for the topmost bundle and untied it slowly. Inside were hand-drawn architectural plans. The heading read, "The Sterling Institute for Future Design, a place for African girls to invent the world they will wear." Elijah stepped closer, eyes wet. "She was going to build a school?" Autumn whispered. "She was already planning the land," he said. "Before you were even born." Tears brimmed in Autumn's eyes. She wasn't just trying to be seen, she was trying to build a future for everyone like her. And now, so would Autumn. The very next week, Autumn stood barefoot in the sand dunes of Badagry, where history ran deep. It was a place of stories, of ships, of struggle, of memory. Now it would become the birthplace of something new. She purchased 10 acres from private owners, no fanfare, no social media buzz. This wasn't for applause, it was for legacy. She hired architects, young ones, Nigerian-born, women who had studied abroad but came home for purpose. She handed them the original blueprints with a firm voice. Keep her bones, build her future. The Sterling Institute for Future Design was officially underway. From the estate, Logan watched everything unfold in silence. Autumn's press team released nothing. No interviews, no attention-seeking headlines, just quiet updates from the architectural firm and whispers from locals that something sacred was rising from the soil. Logan sat alone in his study, a photograph of Marilyn tucked in the pages of his business journal. Guilt coiled around him like ivy. He hadn't just buried a woman. He'd buried a world she was creating. And now his daughter was pulling it back from the grave, piece by piece. The morning Elijah passed, the house was silent. Autumn found him in his room, sitting in his favorite armchair, fully dressed, his white gloves folded neatly in his lap. In his hand was an old, faded picture of Marilyn, tucked between his fingers like it belonged there. There was no pain on his face, no fear, just peace, the kind that comes when a man knows he's done what he was born to do. Autumn wept quietly at his side. Then she whispered, "She waited for you. And you kept your promise." At the groundbreaking of the Institute, Autumn hosted a private tribute. No press, just silence. Sand, blueprints, and 2 chairs side by side, one for Marilyn, one for Elijah. She stood before the small gathering of students, designers, and builders. "Some people build empires," she said. "My mother built blueprints. My godfather kept them safe. And now, you will live inside them." She placed the first stone with her own hands. The crowd clapped softly. Legacy was not loud. It was lasting. Back in the city, Savannah stood in her penthouse, lights off, watching the news on mute. Moda AI's numbers had dropped significantly. Brands were pulling out. Influencers were shifting toward Sterling Reborn's ethical narrative. The silence inside her apartment wasn't golden. It was hollow. No team, no staff. Just her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass, wrapped in designer gowns, drowning in loneliness. She received a package that day. Inside, a personal invitation to the Sterling Institute's inaugural launch. Autumn had written just one line on the card. Be part of something that matters. Savannah stared at it for a long time. Her fingers trembled, but she said nothing. The day of the Institute's launch came. Guests arrived by invitation only. Students, innovators, architects, and entrepreneurs from across the continent. Everyone noticed one person missing. Savannah. Her seat sat empty. Autumn checked her phone for a message. Nothing. Until a small envelope was slipped into her hand by a local courier. No sender name. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note written on black stationery in a sharp, elegant script. You won the crown. Now wear it. No signature. Just silence. Autumn closed her eyes. There was no triumph in this moment. Only a deeper kind of inheritance, the kind that weighed more than gold. The sun rose over Badagry like a silent anthem, casting gold over the newly built courtyard of the Sterling Institute for Future Design. The white stone buildings glowed, each shaped with graceful curves, solar panels glinting on their roofs. Every line of the architecture whispered of something sacred, a legacy resurrected. Autumn Sterling stood at the center of the main stage, flanked by the first class of students. 30 young African women, each draped in fabrics they had designed themselves. Behind them, a screen curved like a halo. Hundreds of dignitaries, creatives, educators, and innovators sat beneath the open-air canopy, fanning themselves as the hum of anticipation filled the space. Autumn stepped forward. The hush deepened. And then, she activated the hologram. A full-bodied projection shimmered into existence. Marilyn Sterling. Beautiful, confident, ageless. A restored version of her, constructed using archive footage, old photos, and AI audio modeling. But this was no stunt. It was a homecoming. If you're hearing this, it means my dream lived on, Marilyn said, her voice rippling across the courtyard. Welcome, daughters of the continent. The future isn't something we wait for. It's something we wear, something we weave, something we build with our own hands. Gasps, then tears. Autumn looked over the crowd and saw grown men with handkerchiefs, mothers gripping their daughters' arms, and students sobbing quietly into their palms. It wasn't a product launch. It was a spiritual relay, a torch passed between lifetimes. Autumn stepped back into the mic. My mother was erased to protect a brand. I became a brand to restore her truth. We are here today because she dreamed beyond herself. And now that dream belongs to every young woman with a vision stitched inside her. A pause. Dignity, she said, her voice firm, is our true inheritance. The audience rose in a standing ovation, not out of obligation, but because something in them had shifted. They had witnessed the resurrection of a name, of a woman, of a legacy denied and now reborn. The moment was broadcast across Africa and beyond, live-streamed to fashion capitals, TEDx forums, and university screens. The speech trended globally. Sterling lives again. Dignity is heritage. African futures. Later that evening, Autumn's phone lit up with a number she hadn't saved, but recognized instantly. Logan Montgomery. She stared at it for a moment, then picked up. His voice was quieter than she remembered. Slower. the kind of voice not used to apology but weighed down by it. "I watched everything," he said. "Your mother would have been proud." Autumn was silent. Then came the unexpected. "I'm proud too." Autumn closed her eyes. For a long time she said nothing, because now she understood something deeper. Validation from him wasn't necessary. It never had been. What she had built wasn't about his name. It was about honoring the woman who gave her life, and never got to live hers fully. Truth didn't erase pain. It redeemed it. By the next quarter, Sterling Reborn had grown into a multi-million-dollar brand, with manufacturing partnerships across West Africa and retail deals in Paris, Johannesburg, and Dubai. But Autumn wasn't content with commerce. She traveled to Ghana, Kenya, and Rwanda, meeting with ministries, educators, and tech incubators to bring the Sterling Institute model to more African nations. Everywhere she went, she carried her mother's sketches, now digitized, and a simple message. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. Somewhere in Lagos, in a quiet suite high above the city, Savannah Montgomery watched an interview clip of Autumn speaking at the African Fashion Futures Conference. Savannah's empire had faded, not from scandal, but from emptiness. Moda AI had become a shadow of what it could have been. The sparkle was still there, but the soul was missing. For weeks she debated reaching out, but the words never formed. So she wrote a check. Anonymous, 7 figures, no memo line, just a direct deposit into the Sterling Institute's fund for international student scholarships. She didn't need acknowledgement. That wasn't the point. She finally understood what Autumn had offered all along: a way out of the war. One evening, as Autumn closed her laptop and stretched across her studio desk, her assistant walked in holding a visitor card. "Someone's requesting a private meeting," she said. Autumn raised an eyebrow. "I don't do unscheduled meetings." The assistant hesitated. "She says she's your cousin, Marilyn's niece, from the U.S. Autumn turned slowly. "What?" The assistant handed her a tablet with the visitor's profile. A young woman, maybe 24, with a bold, short haircut, dark lipstick, and glowing eyes. Her name, Harper Sterling. Attached was a note. "I've studied your mother's work for years. She was my aunt, and I've spent my life finishing what she started on this side of the world. I think it's time the Sterling women worked together." Below that, 5 stunning designs, innovative, fierce, unlike anything Autumn had ever seen. Autumn stared at the screen, heart pounding. A new chapter was knocking. Was this fate? Or was the Sterling legacy still unfolding? If this story moved you, imagine what's coming next. Don't forget to hit the like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful billionaire dramas that uncover secrets, love, and legacy. Turn on the notification bell, because the next story might just change everything.